Hi, welcome to Writing Bodies. My name's Andy Jackson, and this is an online poetry workshop run for the City of Melbourne Libraries. I'd say thanks for coming, but of course, perhaps you haven't gone anywhere. You're probably at home, as I am. When we run workshops, it's often a very community experience. We're in it together, and there's something quite powerful about sitting in a room and listening to poems and doing some writing and talking together. Unfortunately, we can't do all of that today, but we can actually do the thinking and the writing and the sharing together on some level. What we'll miss out on, we'll gain by perhaps being able to do this at your own pace. So what we'll be writing in the next period of time, we'll talk about some poems, we'll do some thinking about them, and I'll get you to do some of your own writing. In that space, you'll be able to actually pause the video whenever you like. And of course, you can even do the exercises multiple times. You can come back, rewind, think again, pause. So you can do it at your own pace. And of course, you can do it by yourself, quietly in your own space. So this is one of the advantages of the world that we are in at the moment. Writing bodies. What do I mean by that? And as usual, of course, these things always have multiple meanings. When I say writing bodies, I'm thinking, of course, about writing about bodies. So writing embodiment, what it means to have the body as a central focus of a poem or a piece of writing. But I'm also thinking about writing bodies in the sense of bodies that write, the kind of bodies are writing. So these exercises and ideas are really a way for you to perhaps access a way of writing that is bodily, that is more about what you know underneath from here down, rather than purely in an abstract kind of intellectual way. And accessing the kind of knowledge and way of using language that is unique to your embodiment and the history of your body. And of course, we are going to be talking about poetry and we're going to be writing poetry, but if you're someone who doesn't call yourself a poet, you can still go through this workshop and get some things out of it. Because I think really what we're talking about is a way of writing. So whether it's poetry or not, don't worry about the labels. We're also here for experienced poets too, so that is something that you can take advantage of too. First up, what I want to do is just read a couple of quotes that I've found over the years that I have found really useful in terms of thinking about what poetry does and what writing does to us as readers as well as writers. So, especially if we're thinking too about how writing affects us bodily, what it does to us. There's often the idea out there that we are writing is a therapeutic activity, that it makes us better. And perhaps this is kind of exemplified by this quote from Franz Kafka. A book must be the axe for the frozen sea inside us. And an alternative approach, perhaps the other side of the same coin, is this Emily Dickinson quote. If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold no fire can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. These are the only ways I know it. Is there any other way? So on the one hand, a poem defrosts us, breaks the kind of frozenness of our lives and opens us up to the warmth of life, and perhaps heals by breaking us. And yet on the other hand, if we take Emily Dickinson seriously, a poem might wound us a book might open us up and not heal us, and perhaps make life more complicated. And I don't think these two things are completely separate. I think they're able to be brought together, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing over the course of this workshop. The third quote I want to read is bringing those two together. I think it's Adrienne Rich, the American poet, and she says, "A poem can't free us from the struggle for existence, but it can uncover desires and appetites buried under the accumulating emergencies of our lives. The fabricated wants and needs we have had urged on us, have accepted as our own. It's not a philosophical or psychological blueprint. It's an instrument for embodied experience." So as I say, we're going to read some poems together and then talk a little bit about what happens within those poems and how they work, and then I'll get you to do some writing. First up, we're going to sort of read two poems at a time. This first pair of poems I'm referring to as kind of uncanny insights. So the sort of poems that on some level are about everyday experience, but they're the sort of everyday experiences that are that open up our sense of the world into something completely different, more than what we think it is. This first one is by the American poet Gregory Orr, and it's called "The Hand Brightness Falls from the Air," and the subtitle or the below it is "For My Daughter at 3 months." Maybe you thought it was a bird, or some other strange and harmless creature fluttering in attendance as you lay on your back in the crib. But today I watched as you held your hand inches above your face, gazed a long, unknowing moment, then suddenly understood its splayed star shape was yourself. You screamed. I lifted you up and held you close, and all the while I felt you falling toward our world. These poems we'll make available for you, so you'll be able to read them while I'm reading them, and you can read back on them later on. But I'll move now to the second poem, and I'll talk about them both in a second. This second poem is Sylvia Plath, and the poem is pretty famous, but I think it's really worth reading as a contrast to. This is called Cut. What a thrill. My thumb instead of an onion. The top quite gone, except for a sort of hinge of skin. A flap like a hat, dead white. Then that red plush. Little pilgrim, the Indians axed your scalp. Your turkey wattle carpet rolls straight from the heart. I step on it, clutching my bottle of pink fizz. A celebration this is. Out of a gap 1,000,000 soldiers run, redcoats every one. Whose side are they on? Oh, my homunculus, I am ill. I have taken a pill to kill the thin, papery feeling. Saboteur, kamikaze man, the stain on your gauze Ku Klux Klan babushka darkens and tarnishes, and when the bald pulp of your heart confronts its small mill of silence, how you jump. Trepanned veteran, dirty girl, thumb stump. I actually had a friend of mine do something very, very similar, but to a finger, and it is an incredible shock to be wounded, especially in the act of something so everyday as preparing food. But here in the Plath poem is this overwhelming kind of torrent of metaphor, and if you look at them all together, they don't quite sit together. there's a scalping, there's soldiers, there's a homunculus, which is a kind of miniature version of the self, a kind of short person who lives within you or me. Kamikaze, you have a babushka, this kind of nested doll as well, this smaller version of the self again. But so many of these don't seem to quite add up together, but that's the whole point. We have a kind of multiple deluge of metaphor to handle this kind of chaos of the accident. What we have in the Gregory Orr poem, which is the hand, brightness falls from the air, this image of the hand as other in a similar way, but in not as a wounded hand, but as a kind of normal everyday thing. And as the child looking at the hand, the baby looking at a hand and realizing this isn't some magical object, some strange creature or bird, but their own hand. And the hand at that point suddenly becoming not incorporating the wonder of the hand into your own self-image, but it being somehow terrifying. And the poem says it, you screamed, I lifted you up and held you close, and all the while I felt you falling toward our world. So here again, both poems have this kind of insight, a sense that the regular world is interrupted. With the Gregory Orr poem, the child is made aware that the body is somehow other and is somehow connected to the self, but also disconnected from the self, this strange object which creates the sensation of falling into the world. With the Plath poem, the hand is other and the body is other as a kind of thrill, but as a dark, alluring shock at the same time. What I want to suggest that you can do is think of very, perhaps everyday encounters that you've had, or that you even imagine, that then can become the source of a writing. So something that may just happen every single day, something very ordinary, that then has the potential to reveal itself as being uncanny, as being strange, and perhaps offering some kind of insight as to how you return to a bodily sense of the world. And that bodily sense of the world doesn't have to be comfortable or affirming or reassuring, but it could be. What moment could you write? Take a little moment to think about what you've experienced. It may be quite recent, it may be something you look back on in your past, your childhood, even something that you just want to do a different version of what Plath or Orr have done in their poems. So take a break. The video, of course, will stop for a second and then come back, but in this pause, maybe take 10 minutes to write your version of an uncanny insight from an everyday bodily experience. I will see you very, very shortly. Good luck. Hi, welcome back. I hope you've had some time doing some writing, creating some version of a story, a scene where the body and some break or surprise or shock or scene creates some kind of insight or disturbs knowledge on some level. So what you can do, of course, with these pieces of writing, you may not come up with something that's perfect, but what you can do is at least you've generated some lines, some things that might be some resource for you in the future. So you'll need to work over them again. and think about perhaps how the energy of the experience that you're talking about can be embodied in the kind of texture of the language that you're using and the way that you're using the line breaks. You'll be able to see that in both of the poems that I've read already. This second pair of poems I'm calling the body as other. And I'm not thinking about someone else's body as other in the way that we can see people and think that they're unusual or strange. I'm thinking about our own body as being other to us, which is touched on a little bit in the last few poems that we looked at. But these two really address that head on, and they're both actually written by a Polish poet called Anna Swer, with very similar titles, but with quite distinct, related but distinct approaches to the self and the body. This first one is called I Say to My Body. I say to my body, you carcass. I say, you carcass, crated, nailed down, deaf and blind like a padlock. I should beat you till you scream, starve you for 40 days, hang you over the highest abyss of the world. Perhaps then a window in you would open on everything I feel exists, on everything that is closed to me. I say to my body, you carcass, you are afraid of pain and hunger. You are afraid of the abyss. You deaf, blind carcass, I say, and I spit at the mirror. And the second poem is titled in a very similar title. It's called I Talk to My Body. Again, these poems are available for you to read. My body, you are an animal whose appropriate behavior is concentration and discipline, an effort of an athlete, of a saint, of a yogi. Well trained, you may become for me a gate through which I will leave myself, and a gate through which I will enter myself. A plumb line to the center of the earth and a cosmic ship to Jupiter. My body, you are an animal for whom ambition is right. Splendid possibilities are open to us. I'm expecting when you hear and read those poems, there's an immediate sense of perhaps relating to one or the other more strongly. In the first poem, I say to my body, there is a kind of aggression towards it and a kind of, it's not a hatred, but a kind of sense of wanting to drag the body into life. Wanting to drag it out of fear, to threaten it perhaps, to make it do what it should be doing, in the hope that perhaps then a window in you would open on everything I feel exists, on everything that is closed to me. There is some sense here too in this first poem of disrespect, of an aversion towards the body, a sense of distance from it, a sense that the body has some potential that it's not fulfilling, and that the body is referred to as a carcass, which is this kind of absence of life. At the same time though, this kind of reaching for the body and wanting it to be, to embrace pain and hunger, to be alive, to be fully alive. The second poem, I Talk to My Body, has perhaps similar kind of visual appearance on the page. It has a very gentle, deliberate line structure, but the mood and feeling of the poem is much different. You know, my body, you are an animal whose appropriate behavior is concentration and discipline. Similarly, whereas the first poem wanted to kind of force a window to open in the body, in the second poem, the body itself becomes a gate through which I will leave myself and through which I will enter myself. The body here is not a carcass, but is an animal whose appropriate behavior is concentration and discipline, for whom ambition is right, and for whom the body is a line to the center of the earth and a cosmic ship to Jupiter. Both poems do kind of rely on this sense of the body being the way in which we can know more than we think we know, and a way in which we can have access to the world as it is and all its suffering and its pain and its ecstasy and its insights, and perhaps to the world, to the universe even. I want to suggest that you write a poem that has the same title or a similar title to one of these poems, where you speak to your body. And also perhaps where you demand or request or urge or offer something to your body. You may be more drawn to a kind of aggressive, passionate demand. You may be more drawn to a seductive, sympathetic urging. That's up to you. You might want to go with your impulse. You might also want to write against your impulse. So if you tend to be a gentle writing person, you might want to have a go at writing something more forthright and urgent, and vice versa. So think about that. Which gate or window would you want opened? What possibilities would you like to be opened within or through your own embodiment? What would you say to your body? Again, we'll take a little break in the video here. You've got another 10 minutes to sit down and write something, see what comes out. Again, don't think too much about it. Don't edit as you go, just write and see what happens. And I think some interesting things could happen. So, good luck. We'll see you very soon. Hi, welcome back. I hope you've had some chance to write a poem addressed to your body. Again, you're probably going to come up with something that is quite rough and raw and ready. The next step, of course, is to go back and rework it and see what are the highlights and the really surprising things that you may have come up with. Sometimes it's the whole poem that you think, actually, the shape of it's right there. Other times, what you come up with is perhaps the beginning's great, and the rest doesn't work so well, or the ending's great, but you don't know how to get there. It may just be a few lines here and there that you think, actually, that's a good one. I always suggest going back and picking whatever parts of that you feel really work. One of the advantages, of course, in a physical workshop, if we're all in the same room, is that I could get you to share what you've written, and we could all talk about the things that are working really well and perhaps ones that aren't working so well, and start to tease out where you could go next. I always encourage you to find other writers that you can work with, that you can trust, and you can share your work together and do that kind of mutual feedback that is just priceless. Okay, this third pair of poems I'm going to be looking at are what I'm calling bodily difference and solidarity. So I think when we're thinking of bodies, we often think about the body. So we often think about there being a single body that we all share, we've all got in common. And on some level, that's quite true. If we're thinking, we're all humans, we all do share that kind of embodiment, genetic heritage, and historical evolutionary heritage. There are things that we share as humans, as mammals, as upright primates, however you want to think about it. But I think at a very, very important level, in a subjective sense, in an existential and a phenomenological sense, we are different to each other. We are other to each other. There is a sense in which there's a gap between my experience and yours. And that's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily mean that solidarity or connection or affinity is not possible. In fact, that difference perhaps is a way of connecting to others. There's perhaps no clear way of talking about this in a way that is going to make it seem totally making complete sense. My sense of it is that the best way of understanding the relationship between a difference and solidarity and the connection between the two is through poetry, because it allows us to see and hear the truth as being kind of paradoxical. So as usual, I'm going to read two poems because one poem doesn't capture it entirely. This first poem is by the American poet Jim Ferris, and it's called Poet of Cripples. Let me be a poet of cripples, of hollow men and boys groping to be whole, of girls limping toward womanhood and women reaching back, all slipping and falling toward the cavern we carry within, our hidden void, a place for each to become full, whole, room of our own, space to grow in ways unimaginable to the straight and the narrow, the small and similar, the poor, normal ones who do not know their poverty. Look with care, look deep, know that you are a cripple too. I sing for cripples, I sing for you. So I'll talk about this a little bit before I go into the next poem. Here again in the poem, there isn't an I. There is a me as the singer of the poem singing for cripples. But in a sense, the self is in the background. Here the poem is this kind of collective voice and a reaching for a collective voice, that sense that each of us carry within us a hidden void, a hidden brokenness perhaps, a hollow of whether you want to call it suffering or otherness or deformity or brokenness on some level, whatever you want, however you want to talk about it. He talks about this being a void perhaps inside us, but also that this void is a place in which each of us can become whole. In ways, he says, unimaginable to the straight and the narrow, the small and similar, the poor, normal ones who do not know their poverty. It then generates this kind of really interesting sense of perhaps crippleness, disability, difference, being potentially open to everybody. On the one hand, though, there is also a sense that there are people who are normal who do not know that they're really actually not normal. They refuse to enter into this poetry, this song of being crippled, of being imperfect. And Jim Ferris, the poet, reads towards the reader saying, know that you are a cripple too. I sing for cripples, I sing for you. So here this kind of, I guess, sonnet really of love towards the collective woundedness of humanity. Here is his chance to say, you're invited into this. So this is one option for how we approach difference. I want to read, I don't normally read my own poems or study my own poems in workshops, but I think this is perhaps appropriate in the context of what we're talking about. This one is a list poem, and it's called What I Have Under My Shirt. So for those of you who do or don't know, I have a genetic condition called Marfan syndrome, and for me one of the things that has meant is spinal curvature. That started to happen when I went through puberty, so of course when you're secondary school it can mean a lot of teasing, a lot of questioning, and you know, at times I think it still does. When you are physically different, you are looked at as questionable, sometimes questionable in the really negative sense, but also questionable in terms of people are curious about what's wrong, quote unquote, what happened, that sort of thing. So what I was interested in this poem is providing a series of answers to that question, what's wrong with you, or what happened, or what do you have under your shirt. And of course, they're not technically true, but perhaps they're poetically true, all these answers. So this is called What I Have Under My Shirt. A speed hump. Your eyes must slow down approaching. A stockpile of questions spat from a distance. Bone, muscle, blood, marrow, sinew, viscera, bile, love, irony, all the humours. A backpack. I've been asked. Immense wealth, which I can only share with you if you already have it. Air, breath, held. A free verse poem so lacking in musicality and image that you regret asking, but it's too late, that raw silence. The shape of my father, irretrievable memories. Your shadow, alternate future, Dorian Gray. Another shirt, and underneath, a third shirt, yes, infinite shirts. No, we do not store water in our humps. They are reservoirs of fatty tissue. We have developed many physiological tricks for surviving in places like this. Nothing. Not even whiteness. So, comparing Jim Ferris's poem to that one, where Poet of Cripples is one block of text, a 14-line kind of song that moves quickly from one thing to the next and is a kind of ecstatic, almost celebration of brokenness and invites others in. On one level, there is a little bit of that in What I Have Under My Shirt, but mostly there is also a sense of refusing the question, in suggesting perhaps that there is a mystery and an uncertainty and a complexity to the subjective experience of difference that others, really aren't entitled to or will not have access to. There is perhaps immense wealth, which I can only share with you if you already have it. It is perhaps also your shadow, your alternate future. But a lot of these questions and answers reach dead ends, and it's a list poem because there each are alternate different potential answers, different versions of what could be true. So here again, what I want to suggest that you do is you write your own version of one of those poems. It could be you writing as, not necessarily the poet of cripples, but it could be a poet of whoever you identify as in terms of your experience and identity. That you write as a member of the group of people that you know you are a part of, that you love, this group of people who you feel support and affinity with. You could write that poem. On the other hand, you might want to write a poem of mystery and resistance and giving yourself the respect of keeping distance, to take other people's curiosity about you and turn it into something that is emotionally real, poetically real, truthful, but unreal. Super real, perhaps, that maintains a sense of love for the world and love for the questioning person, but a respect for yourself. Consider too of using the form of both one of either the poem that you work with. So Jim Ferris writes a sonnet, a 14-line, in his way, only rhyming at the end, but you could write a rhyming poem, or just a poem in that shape, or consider writing a list poem, if you want to go with what I have under my shirt. Think about the power of saying the unsayable. Think about the power of allowing other people in, and the power of holding them at a distance, or maybe even doing both. So think again too of how you might do that, but don't think too much. Go into the experience of being the poet of whichever group you want to be a poet of, or respond to the question that you want to respond to with a list poem. See what happens. I'll come back in about 10 minutes again. So again, good luck. When I come back, we'll just do a bit of a wrap up at the end, okay? Hi, welcome back again. So we've spent a little bit of time today doing some writing and reading and thinking about a handful of poems. Writing bodies. Bodies that don't just beat and move and process food and so on, but bodies that are from tip to toe infused with wisdom, infused with a kind of knowledge that needs and wants to come into language. Bodies that write. In your version, it's not the same as my version. Your poems will be different from mine. Your poems will speak with your body's voice, which is different from mine. is different from Sylvia Plath, from Gregory Orrs, from Jim Ferris, from Anna Swears. Your voice is emerging and coming out and takes advantage of those other voices and resonates with other voices and other bodies, but is also completely yours. As usual, what I find with these workshops is when we're sitting in a room together, I hear your rough drafts and we talk about them, and you hear from other people and you get the versions that you get from them. And there's a real power in that. So of course, if you like, you're really invited to perhaps seek out a creative writing or poetry workshop. There are numerous workshops that are run through libraries and through organisations like Writers Victoria, but also little private groups that are run that you can find online. You're welcome also, of course, to try to contact me, get in touch with me through my website. It's been really, an honour to be invited to do this workshop, and I'm really hoping that a lot of you will be writing work that surprises you and that actually forces you to go deeper into your experience as it has been, but also what it can become by being brought into language and brought into a poem. Also encourage you to look at the City of Melbourne Library's Lord Mayor's Creative Writing Competition. There'll be more information available about that very soon. Again, thanks very much for being here, and I really thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing your poems and reading them however they appear. Again, thanks very much, and see you soon.